Hi there, this is Mike Thoming with CIT261. I'm going to give my journal report in under 10 minutes. All right, so let's get rolling. So things really got kicked off in our class in week 2. So we'll start there. We're going to discuss my openness to new ideas, what I learned about myself, and my learning process. All right, so moving on to week 2. We had our initial meeting with our group. We assigned code topics to teach, and I in particular chose NetBeans as my IDE just because I was familiar with that, used it in previous classes. I know it doesn't have advantages that some of the other IDEs have, but I thought it was just kind of my decision process. I felt like since I knew it really well, it was going to be faster for me to get up to speed on JavaScript if I used a tool that I knew. And it turned out to be pretty good. I did eventually supplement that with JS Fiddle for speed of testing some new ideas. And I also selected GitHub to host my webpage because it's free. I was a little concerned about some potential issues that Brother James mentioned. So I took a wait and see kind of approach, knowing that I may have to switch to another hosting solution. But it turned out that GitHub worked just fine. I had no issues throughout the entire semester. So then in week 3, I was really excited. I can't express the elation I felt when I got my first batch of code to publish out to my website, got it to work like I wanted it to. That's always a good feeling, just to get started off that way. And that contained loops, functions, and arrays. I moved on and did objects, inheritance, and methods. Object inheritance was challenging for me. It took me a while to really grasp that concept. I remember spending about 4 hours on that topic alone on a Saturday afternoon, but it paid off, and I learned to follow a process that I probably knew from previous classes, but this was a good reminder. First of all, I needed to follow a written outline of how I wanted to tackle a particular code problem, just kind of outline it in writing just so I knew where I was headed. And then as I worked through that outline, I wanted to make sure I make notes of course changes and why I changed. Otherwise, I found myself going around in circles. I would abandon an idea, and I would forget why I've done that. I had a good reason for it, but I forgot what it was. And then I'd go back to that idea, and I'd run down that rabbit hole again, only to find the roadblock that I ran into previously. So making notes about those course changes, reminding myself why I abandoned those ideas so that I don't circle back to them again, turned out to be really helpful. And then something else I reminded myself of several times this semester, excuse me, was to use the debugger. So that was big in week 3. I experienced a little frustration with our group around that time. We had a hard time finding a meeting time that suited everyone. We ended up meeting on a Saturday afternoon in week 3 at the very last possible chance for us to meet the whole week. And then the team member that required us to meet at that time didn't even make it. So that was really frustrating. But, you work with it, and I found ways to be successful with the team members that were engaged in the class. I thought Kachia and Colin were great, and they were very helpful in several weeks of our joint study sessions. And then in week 4, I passed off JSON and Ajax. JSON was really straightforward. It's a lot like what I did in CIT360 with Java. Ajax was a little challenging, though. I struggled with that in week 4, and then again in my final code project. Again, it reminded me to go back to the debugger and figure out why things aren't working rather than banging my head against the wall. So that was weeks 3 and 4. Week 5, I completed DOM manipulation, local storage. Those were pretty straightforward, pretty simple. I really felt good having some momentum leading up to the CSS topics that were coming next. Those really scared me. But I managed to finish the 3 non-Java CSS code topics in that week. That really surprised me. And I found a strategy that worked for me there is just to find sites that have visual elements that I wanted to use and then reverse engineer those for my own needs. Some of those sites would be ones that Brother James shared. Some were ones that I found myself, but that was a good process for me. And I appreciated that I was finding a good rhythm with only 4 topics, code topics left in the following 4 weeks. Then we moved on to week 7. I was excited again. I got a 10 out of 10 on my JS events code. And through all of that, I found a better way to test my code, my JS events code on a mobile device. I had been pulling up my cell phone and trying to test my site that way, and that wasn't always ideal. It was a slow process. But then I discovered, lo and behold, that the Chrome browser has a way to mimic a mobile device with the click of a button. So that improved my efficiency with testing my mobile events code. But I did start to feel that I was losing steam. This was the second coding class that I've taken in the last 2 semesters. Coding does not come naturally to my brain. I had really prepared myself for the last one, and I had kind of forgotten that this one was coming up on my grad plan. So it just kind of caught me by surprise. I'm trying to keep my energy up for it, but by week 7, I was starting to really lag. But kept plugging along, had to finish strong. Week 8, I finished 3 more code topics. I only got basic rating on those last CSS ones, but I figured I would go back to those in a coming week. I also discovered an idea for my final project during this week. I decided to do a tithing calculator. So I started to sketch out my plan, and it started, at first I wasn't sure if that was going to be a robust enough idea, but then I saw ways that I could incorporate all of the elements that I needed to pull in, and that it was going to offer enough complexity to use most of the required code topics, if not all of them. So that was week 8. And then in week 9, got all the code topics done. It was HTML5 tags. That was a fun one, incorporating video and audio into my website. I started to realize that some of my biggest roadblocks have come from overthinking problems. I oftentimes make them harder than they really are by pursuing unnecessarily difficult solutions or roundabout approaches. Usually the solution has been much simpler than I imagined, and I just had to step back a little bit and let the answers kind of come to me. But having all those code topics done, man, that felt like hitting a home run. That was a big hurdle to get over. I was excited about that. All right, in week 10, it was time to start applying everything that I had learned in the previous semester. I also was really excited that I was so far ahead on my code topics that I had an extra week. Turned out to be really important because my mother-in-law passed away that week, and we had to travel out to Idaho to visit family and let my wife be there with them. It was a hard time, but it was good again that I was able to get things done to allow me to do what I needed to do for my family. And, putting things in perspective, as important as these classes are to me and getting my education is to me, I have to remember that, it's family that really comes first. On to week 11. So I got my project proposal done. I was just really retracing my steps, making sure I remembered what I learned and applying it in my final project application. I tried to remember not to dive too deeply into any one method or solution until I was sure that it would work. I had to really focus myself to scan several possible solutions and determine the best one, rather than diving too deeply into one and then eventually finding that it wouldn't work and having wasted a lot of time on it. So again, just kind of scanning briefly ideas, finding the one that works best before I commit a lot of time to it. And then weeks 12 through 14, I finished my journal report. I wrapped up my final project. I was thrilled to get a good score on that. Again, just some of the things that I learned throughout the class, making sure I sketch out ideas before I start coding. I wanted to make sure I track concept changes and the reasons for the change. The one I just mentioned, not diving too deeply into a particular solution until I'm sure that it will work. Rather, it's better to go over several until I find the right one and then commit more time to it. I also had to remember not to overlook easy resources. The debugger, and oftentimes we have a textbook that has a lot of information, maybe not in this class so much, but there are a lot of easy resources, and I don't have to go reinvent the wheel, I guess. Have to remember to use the People Network. Colin was a great resource. He's got a lot of coding background. He works in software development, so he was a great resource among other people. I always have to remember to pay attention to details, a semicolon in the wrong place, or not parsing an AJAX JSON return in the right way. That all made a big difference for me in all of my work here. But at the same time, even though you're paying attention to details, you don't overthink it. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. And finally, just keep my perspective. So we're coming up on 10 minutes here. That's what I feel like I've learned in this class. It's been a great experience. I'm excited to have it behind me, but I'm excited to have experienced what I have and now have some of this knowledge that I hope to apply in not only JavaScript, but other coding languages as I go on in my career. Been a pleasure, and thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.